Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have one of those Saturday night at the movies nights where we need every chair to be vacated from coats so we can seat people and fill people in. So any of you, make sure and wave if you've got an empty seat, because I'm going to be full house tonight. Big crowd, I don't want to keep you waiting, we're going to start on time. A personal note, I had to be in Detroit this morning doing some work. It's great to be home. We're very pleased to have as our speakers team together, Bob Regan and Tim Fabian. They've been here before, 2 years ago I think it was. Whenever they come out with a book, we get them here, and obviously you're happy about that choice. And they're going to show slides, talk about the bridges, talk about their book, and I don't need to say anything more. It's all yours.
Thank you. Before we start, whenever we do a presentation like this, the publisher sends along books and they offer them at a special price. So if you want to buy some afterwards, they're only $20, both either the steps or the bridge book. I live in Squirrel Hill, but I'm a Bostonian by Bostonian by birth, rather, and a Pittsburgher by choice. But Pittsburgh, the city always strikes me as like the Rodney Dangerfield of American cities. You know, it gets absolutely no respect. And I think this was justifiable many years ago when the city led the nation in air and water pollution, industrial accidents, and disease. Indeed, in 1940, when Frank Lloyd Wright was asked what to do with the city, he suggested that we abandon it. Fortunately, no one took his advice, and we all know what happened. And through the Renaissance, we're back, and Pittsburgh is now routinely rated as one of the most livable cities in the United States. And in 2003, I believe it was, U.S. News and World Report published a list of the 10 most scenic places in the United States. Number 2 was Pittsburgh, particularly the view from Mount Washington. If you're wondering, number 1 was Sedona, Arizona. And so I think one of the things Tim and I are doing with our books is trying to call attention to some of the unique facets of the city. And we refer to this series of books, both the Steps book and the Bridge book, as like a Pittsburgh Pride series. Now, Pittsburgh certainly is often called the city of bridges, and justifiably so, as almost every major road into or out of the city crosses a bridge. The city also has every conventional bridge there is, except a drawbridge. And in true Berg fashion, it has some special bridges, like a recycled bridge, a 2-in-1 bridge, a buried bridge, and a bridge inside a building. And we'll talk about those. Also, if you look at the bridges, they give the history of bridge building technology over their ages, from classic Roman stone arch bridges to the first bridge ever designed on a computer. And the city has given rise to some of the great bridge building designers and engineers. Roebling, Ferris, who was a bridge engineer, invented the Ferris wheel, and Gustav Lindenthal. But whenever you hear the title of the City of Bridges, it's often followed by a caveat, second only to Venice, Italy. So the first thing we set out to do was to discover exactly how many bridges there are in the city of Pittsburgh. And it was not an easy task. There's been lots of numbers thrown around. 1,900, 700, 200. And a lot of these numbers, when you look at them, they confuse Allegheny County, the greater Pittsburgh area, are only one portion of the Pittsburgh bridges. So we were able to get databases from the bridge owners, the city, the county, Port Authority, and PennDOT. Totally inconsistent, totally incompatible, and totally out of date. It took months to reconcile all these and come up with a number, and fortunately, all of the people we dealt with at these various agencies were very helpful. And we were able to get the exact number here. The city, the county, PennDOT, and the Port Authority owned. Then there were the railroads. We didn't even know who the railroads were. I think Tim will tell you later that changed a little bit as a result of the book. But we didn't even know, who to ask the railroads, what bridges they had. So that required a physical survey of the city, going out and looking at all the railroad bridges. All of the databases were reconciled, the railroad bridges were counted, and the number is 446. Many more than the city of Venice, many more than St. Petersburg, Russia, more than any other city in the world. Pittsburgh truly is the bridge capital. Now, an interesting story about this. We were very fortunate that Associated Press did a story on the bridge book and on the number of bridges in the city. And the story went international. And at one point, sometime in August, I think, I received a copy of the story as it appeared in the English language edition of the Shanghai China newspaper, telling that Pittsburgh was the bridge capital of the world. About 2 weeks later, I read in Pittsburgh Magazine some unique facts about Pittsburgh. One, they said, was the city had 120 bridges. I couldn't resist, so I wrote them a letter and pointed out that while the city's database said it had 120 bridges, that was city-owned bridges, and it was inaccurate, and the true number was 446. And further, I found it fascinating that 2 weeks before they published their article, an article appeared in the Shanghai China newspaper correctly stating there were 446 bridges in the city of Pittsburgh. To their credit, they published my letter to the editor. But if you look around the city, it's not just the number. It's also the variety. We have bridges that carry people, cars, railroads, buses, light rail. We've had bridges that carried water, and we've had bridges that carried hot metal. So it's the number, and it's the variety. Also, it's the beauty. Pittsburgh bridges are beautiful, and there's a reason for that. Ever since, I think it was 1907, the Fine Arts Commission has to approve the design of any bridge costing more than $25,000. And I think it shows. And as an example of this, I love to point out the Portal Bridge. This is the bridge that you walk under going from where the Hilton Hotel is out to Point State Park. Look at that bridge sometime, it's magnificent. Also think of what it carries. It carries an interstate highway. It's extremely difficult to impact the design of an interstate highway bridge, and especially the way they have done that. I mean, that's a real testament to the power of the city and their belief in the beauty of the bridges. And I think we'll show you some more examples of that. But the city's bridges are beautiful, they have a great variety, and we have the great number. Bridges also, affect the arts and education in the city. There's a magnificent mural by, is it Douglas Cooper, Tim?
Yes.
Yeah, Douglas Cooper, down at the new Student Union University Center at Carnegie Mellon University. It's about 200 feet around, and it depicts the skyline of Pittsburgh, and the bridge is just absolutely dominating. There's also a building on the south side where Bill Cowher used to work. It's a Steelers training facility, and they have a glass wall on the outside and a magnificent mural showing the Heinz Field, showing sort of ethereally Three Rivers Stadium and some of the Steeler standouts in PNC Park, but equally dominant in that mural are the bridges of the city, because you just can't get away from them. They're also used a lot by city educators in courses. And you'll hear Tim's favorite story later, but mine is when I was doing some research on this, I was down in the Pennsylvania room in the Carnegie Library, trying to get access to a book. I think it was White's book on bridges. It was published around 1910. You can't check it out. You can only request it to look at it in the room. The same time I was there was someone beside me about this tall requesting the same book. What is this? This led to a discussion with this fourth grader and his father, and it ended up me visiting their class at Christ the Divine Teacher Academy in Aspinwall. This fourth grade class, they had an assignment to select a bridge on the Allegheny River, visit it, take pictures of it, learn bridge terminology, do a report complete with a bibliography on the bridge, and build a model of the bridge using popsicle sticks. Fourth grade. I've taught graduate students if you can't do a report with bibliographies. This was the best part of the whole project for me. And so the bridges have figured so much in education and in the arts also. So let's talk about some of them. Not all 446. Number one. Well, the most famous ones, of course, are the Three Sisters. This is the 6th, 7th, and 9th Street bridges, or the Clemente, the Warhol, and the Carson bridges. The only 3 identical side-by-side bridges in the world. Also, the only bridges of this design in the world. They were modeled after a bridge over the Rhine River in Germany, which was destroyed during World War II. And I always have the sneaking suspicion that the bombardier was from Pittsburgh. Took out that bridge. This is called the self-anchored suspension bridge. The only types in the world, the only 3 identical side by side, and people from around the world come to study these big bridges. Now, the only true suspension bridge in the city is the South 10th Street Bridge over the Monongahela River. The Smithfield Street Bridge was not designed by Roebling. It was designed by Gustav Lindenthal. This is the 3rd bridge at that site. That site was the first site of any bridge in the city. It was a wooden covered bridge, as most of them were. The 2nd bridge at that site was Roebling's Bridge. And the 3rd and present bridge is the Lindenthal Bridge. This is the oldest extant bridge in the city. It's also the oldest through truss bridge in the world. And a through truss driving bridge, you can easily remember it because I learned the name that a lot of older residents call it, the Kissing Fish Bridge. We'll see pictures of it later. It looks like kissing fishes. A little further down the river is the Fort Pitt Bridge. This is the first bridge ever designed on a computer. Down further at the point, there are no bridges, but there used to be. That famous pier by Heinz Field is the site of the 2nd bridge that went from the point to the north side. The first bridge there was called the Union Bridge. The 2nd bridge was Manchester Bridge, and that's the Manchester Bridge Pier. There's another pier on the southern side of the Monongahela River, not as apparent. It's lower, and there's usually barges tied up to it. This is one of the point bridges. There were 2 bridges from the point to the south side, known only as Point Bridge number 1 and Point Bridge number 2. All of the bridges, of course, are now gone. Now, my favorite bridge is the Wilkesboro Ave footbridge. And I don't think we have a picture of the slides, but there's one in the book. And I would urge anyone that can to go see this bridge. It is absolutely magnificent. It's in the Brighton Heights neighborhood. It's on Wilkesboro Ave. It's a 110-foot tall bridge of iron lattice work over this ravine, and it is simply majestic. And that's a little-known bridge in the city, and I think it ranks easily as my favorite. Yes, there is a picture of it. Yeah. Page 93, thank you. Now, I alluded earlier to some typical burg bridges. One is the Buried Bridge, and that's the Belfield Bridge. It is the safest, bridge requiring the least maintenance in the city. It lies right under the Mary Shenley Fountain in front of the Frick Fine Arts Building between the Carnegie Library and Hillman Library of Posver Hall. Where the parking lot used to be, the new park was once a ravine. And there was a majestic stone arch bridge that you could travel from the Carnegie Library over to Forbes Field. When they filled in the ravine, they left the bridge there completely intact, and it lies undisturbed beneath the Mary Shenley Fountain. The TwoInOne Bridge. We all, I'm sure, have traveled across the HotMetal Bridge. That's not the HotMetal Bridge. That's the Mon Connecting Railroad Bridge. The HotMetal Bridge is the one beside it. It's being converted into a pedestrian bicycle path. So I allude to that as the TwoInOne Bridge. The Recycled Bridge. This was the second bridge at 6th Street, where the Clemente Bridge now is. When they were going to replace that bridge, Allegheny County decided that it would be cheaper to break it into parts, float it down the river, and establish it at Neville Island. And that's what they did. And we have pictures of that in the book too, I think, in the floating sections of this bridge down the river. Now, a bridge in a building. The USX Tower, when they were building that, there was a railroad tunnel on the site. When they excavated, they removed the railroad tunnel, and they were putting in the parking lot. They installed the tunnel back in on a bridge support. And so if you take the light rail in downtown Pittsburgh, you actually travel through a tunnel on a bridge inside a building. The bridge that is a building is the Bridge of Sighs. From the old Allegheny Courthouse to old Allegheny Jail to the county courthouse. That is not carried on the county's bridge department rolls or anywhere. It's carried by the building department. Allegheny County considers that a building, not a bridge. So these are some typical Pittsburgh bridges. In closing, I'd just like to remark that as far as I can determine, I think all of our bridges are safe. I know there's been a lot of reports in the media about the fact that Western Pennsylvania bridges get a C or a D. Absolutely true. But if you read the reports, what are they doing? They're comparing these bridges to today's standards. Lane widths, turning radius, items like this. A good analogy, I always say, is physiologically comparing me to Ben Roethlisberger. We're both healthy, but we can't meet the same standards. Our bridges are healthy, they just can't meet today's standards. And if we read the federal and state reports, they all conclude by stating the bridges are safe. So they're safe, they're plentiful, they're beautiful, and there's great variety. And I think we should just enjoy them. Tim, you want to
Those of you who were here for the last presentation may recall my conversation about this little plastic camera that I bought at a flea market for $2. Okay? About half the pictures from the Steps book, which was our previous book, was done with this camera. Okay? Now I don't have a lot to add to what Bob said technically about bridges or about Pittsburgh. You'll know we love Pittsburgh. You'll know we've done a couple of books about Pittsburgh. And you've heard a lot of technical information about bridges from Bob. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the photography angle. Okay? So an angle I mean quite literally. With the steps, as you recall, I walked up to steps and I made photographs of steps with this camera. Okay, and then there were some steps that I had to use a regular camera with, but this camera worked just fine, even though I bought it for $2 at a flea market. And all it knows is click, right? And it's a panorama camera, but the only reason it's a panorama camera is because it's got this funny little mask in it. Okay? It's really a regular 35mm camera. All right? So the steps were relatively intimate. I could walk up to them, photograph them from the bottom, photograph them from the top, photograph them standing on them, kind of move away from them a little bit, photograph their surroundings and whatnot. But it was relatively straightforward in that regard. There wasn't a lot of difference. There was just different angles of view and points of view for each set of steps. Well, I started with this project thinking that the bridges were going to be very much the same as the steps. Now, the bridges and the steps started out very differently. The bridges was an assigned project, and the steps were not. When Bob and I first met, as some of you may recall, we met at a party. Well, we actually met at the Great Ride, but we just were briefly introduced. Besides that, we met again at a party. And Bob said, well, you want to do this thing about steps? And I said, well, sure. And we had no idea it was going to be a book or anything like that. We just kind of worked on the project and worked on the project. I made pictures, and he did research and wrote and made maps and so on. And then we got it together, and we thought, well, what are we going to do with this? And we took it around to some publishers and found a publisher, and they published us. So it was culled primarily from existing material. We had pretty much the document. We just needed to have it edited and tightened up and published. Okay? But the bridge book was commissioned. The publisher, based on the success of the steps book, said, hey guys, why don't you do another book? And why shouldn't it be on bridges? And we said, okay. And I at least expected it to be very much the same. So I went out with my little plastic camera and I tried to take pictures of bridges, and guess what? Bridges don't look much like bridges when you're on them. You know, when you drive down the road and you're driving on a bridge looks like a road. In a lot of cases, it doesn't really look like a bridge. So I discovered that this was going to be a very different project, and I wasn't going to be able to use my $2 plastic camera. So I got out my regular, my conventional 35mm Nikon equipment, and I started looking at bridges. And I discovered that what it was that I needed to find views of the bridges from distances. Okay, so it really struck me as another opportunity to see our city literally from a different point of view, because that's what I had to find, was the points of view, that you could see the bridges, that they would look like bridges, that the images were composed properly, and so on. Okay. Moreover, the publisher kept saying that what they wanted, since they commissioned this work, so they had a lot more to say about it from the word go than they did about the steps book. And so they kept saying, well, what we really want is the National Geographic view. Okay? And I wasn't really sure what they meant about that, but I was pretty sure they didn't want me to go out and get all sorts of third world people and put them on the photograph. So I assumed that what they really meant was that they wanted a very straightforward kind of image with the composition handled, the main subject of the composition handled more or less in a centered fashion, with an easy to read composition, more illustrative, if you will, than the steps book was. And that's what I did, and they ended up liking it, and that was fine. So it gave me an opportunity to see Pittsburgh from a different angle of view and to explore different areas of Pittsburgh than I did with the steps. With the steps, I was very much into each neighborhood and into each area where each set of steps was. With the bridges, I could find views all over the place, and it worked out pretty well, but it was further away. It was less intimate, and it was also less intimate on a personal level. I didn't interact with as many people as I did when I did the bridge book. I'm sorry, the steps book. But to make a long story short, Bob mentioned a couple of times that I would say something about my favorite bridge. And my favorite bridge is the 16th Street Bridge. And it's my favorite because it's so interesting and challenging visually. But my favorite story about a bridge actually comes from one of these book gigs. Okay? There are two kinds of book gigs. There's this kind, where we talk and we show slides and we answer questions and we sell books. And then there's another kind, which usually happens in a bookstore, where we sit behind a table and we smile and we sign books that they buy at the register. Okay? And it was at one of these, and we have to smile pretty too. No, it was at one of these bookstore gigs. Okay, it was at the Borders, the new Borders in Pittsburgh Mills, way out on Route 28. And it was in the morning. It was when the store opened. Bob and I are sitting at our table, and the store opens, and the first guy through the door says, I just wanted to stop and see if any of my bridges were in your book. We kind of looked at each other. I could see him thinking what I was thinking, which was, yeah, right. This guy's got a little driveway with a little culvert over, underneath with a little bridge on it. And he wants to know whether we put his driveway in our book. So we start talking about, you know, the Roman stone arch bridge on Washington Boulevard, the beautiful barrel arches made in huge, massive stone bridge. It's just gorgeous. Okay, so this guy starts talking about these barrel arches, and Bob, along with me, thinking, yeah, right, launches into the same thing that he just told you about. Oh yes, we have, you know, in the city of Pittsburgh, we have all this variety of bridge design. We have these wonderful ancient stone barrel arches, and you know, not 5 miles away, we have the first bridge designed by a computer, blah, blah, blah. The guy says, no, you misunderstand, I own that bridge. Oh, it turned out he owned the Allegheny Southern Railroad, and he not only owned that bridge, but he also owned the 33rd Street Railroad Bridge and the Green Branch Cutoff, and we were very fortunate to have 3 of his bridges in our book. So actually he was really nice, he gave us his card, told us we could play on his bridges anytime we wanted, bought a couple books, and he's a really good guy. But that was my favorite. Oh, I just wanted to see if any of my bridges were in your book. Just goes to show you, you never really know, okay? Like, I was really meant it, right? Yeah, okay, I got bridges, you know? I really had bridges. I don't really have a lot to add, as I mentioned to Bob, so instead of boring you with more technical talk about photography, which I could do, the Steps book I used, very fast, very grainy film, 3200. In this book, they were illustrative, so I used slower, sharper film and so on, but instead of boring you with all that, why don't we show you pictures? Now, I gotta tell you, when I started this project with the first project, the Steps book with Bob said to me, well, you know, I tried to take some pictures and I really couldn't do it, so I decided I needed a professional photographer. And, you know, he was selling himself considerably short. Not only that, he has spent some time looking at and learning about photography since then. So when you see...
Looking at
mine, anyway. So you'll see the first pictures are Bob's, and you'll see he did a very, very good job illustrating the things that he wants to talk about. And then you'll see a few of my pictures. There'll be a couple from the Bridge book and a couple from the Steps book. Without further ado, if we could get the lights, I'll have Bob start.
he was right about looking at photography. He took 5,000 pictures for the Steps book. Looking at photography. The only reason I took slides is that we had a speaking engagement, we needed slides, and Tim was out of town. There are only 3 types of bridges: a beam, an arch, a suspension bridge. Now, no field of engineering or science can live with only 3 types. There are a dozen variations on a theme. But this is a basic beam bridge. And the difference between the 3 types is they can span further distances. As the spanning length goes up, so does the cost of the bridge. So a lot of city bridges in the cities are the simple, and a lot of railroad bridges are the simple beam bridge. Next slide.
Is that the Lincoln Avenue Bridge?
Yes, it is. That's the railroad bridge from the Lincoln Avenue Bridge. That's actually the Allegheny Valley Railroad Bridge.
So that's a bridge from a bridge.
Yep, next slide.
And well illustrates the notion that a bridge doesn't look like a bridge when you're on it.
That's right. This is another simple beam bridge. This is Forbes Avenue. I think it's over Boundary Street, or yeah, in Oakland, right beside the new building at Carnegie Mellon University. And an arch bridge, the Swindell Bridge, carrying the Boulevard of the Allies over Panhandle Hollow. You can see that it spans a much further distance, and you couldn't get a beam bridge that goes this far. I think a beam bridge is limited to like 800 feet. Next slide, please. Another arch bridge, the Panhandle Hollow Bridge in Panhandle Hollow. And I think Tim has some photos later that show the fact that, well, the Swindell Bridge is a fairly basic arch bridge. This has tremendous stonework on each end, with walkways through it and under it. Just repeatedly we'll be talking about the beauty of the Pittsburgh bridges. Next slide. This is the Roman Stone Arch Railroad Bridge. It's on Washington Boulevard. You'll be coming down from Fifth Avenue or Frankstown Road down towards Aspinwall. You see this bridge. It's absolutely breathtaking. And a real lesson here in how much the city values bridges is that that bridge was built by the, I think it was the Pennsylvania Railroad, and it was for a very short line railroad. It just ran from East Liberty over to Aspinall. And yet, look at the care. I mean, they could have built something quite simple, rustic. This is a very rural area, but they built this magnificent, I think it's 7 arches of stone. Several years later, when the city was going to build the Lincoln Ave Bridge, it mimicked this bridge. The Lincoln Ave Bridge is also a Roman stone arch bridge. And this setting must have been magnificent when Sylvan Lake was there. There was a lake there at the intersection of those two bridges. There's that classic Roman stone arch bridge. And it amazes me that in the city, this is separated by only 5 miles from the first bridge built on a computer, or designed on a computer. This is such a magnificent bridge. I hope you.
I'm sorry, sir, you misunderstand me. I own that bridge.
This is the Glendale Bridge. This is a beam bridge,
Glenwood.
basically. Glenwood, sorry, thank you. This is a beam bridge, basically, but it has trusses on it. And I think it's known technically as a Warren truss. Just like I mentioned, you can't just have 3 basic designs. You have to have variations on a theme. The truss adds support to the basic beam bridge. Next slide. This is the only true suspension bridge in the city. And a true suspension bridge, you have the cables, the rolling cables, and there are actually thousands of little wires in those cables. And at the end of the bridge, underneath, they splay out into individual fibers and are anchored into concrete. And luckily for us, I mean, this is a very safe bridge that they're all anchored underneath in the ground. Now, in the Three Rivers Bridge, they're called a self-anchored suspension bridge. They don't have cables. They don't have this type of structure. And at the end, they're anchored into the stonework at the end of the bridge. Very unique, because they're only ones 3 in the world right here. Next slide. This is the Panhandle Bridge, a railroad bridge now carrying light rail over the Monongahela. I forget the full name of the railroad this once served, but it served the West Virginia Panhandle, and always just known as its nickname as the Panhandle, or the Panhandle Bridge. Next slide. The Kissing Fish Bridge, the oldest extant bridge in the city, and you know, it could be a poster boy for the fact that Pittsburgh bridges are beautiful.
How old is it?
Is it? Thank you. This is the Fort Wayne Railroad Bridge. It's over the Allegheny River near the Convention Center. This is the only railroad bridge in the area that has ever suffered the ravages of salt. Salt is what damages most bridges. On the highways, we have to salt the bridges in the winter. You don't have to salt railroad bridges. This is a double-decker railroad bridge. The lower deck is completely ruined from the salt. And why? Because the lower deck was a spur track down into the Strip District. And years ago, the refrigerated cars were refrigerated using brine. And the brine leaked and so destroyed that bridge. So the Port Authority claims they have to build tunnels. They can't rehabilitate it. Who knows? Next slide. This is my feeble attempt at the Three Rivers Bridges, and it's terrible. Thankfully, Tim has a picture later. But while we're on it, we'll just show you one aspect here. You can see a hint in the background of the Convention Center roof, which is designed to mimic that loop that's in the cabling of the Three Sisters bridges. And notice that that they're all the same color as are most of the bridges in downtown Pittsburgh. This color is Aztec gold. They're all pointed yellow, and this was done in conjunction with the Downtown Business Partnership to reflect the golden triangle. So you have bridges that are owned by the PennDOT, by the county, and and by the city, all painted the same color. Next slide. A closer view of the chaining that's on this. It's not really a cabling. It really resembles more a bicycle chain than the classic cabling on a railroad bridge, as you can see there. And the last link here goes under the pier straight down. There's big metal plates built into the pier, and that's what holds the bridge together. It's self-anchored. They didn't have enough room to do the classic suspension bridge.
How did you get the pictures about traffic?
I have no idea.
Sunday,
Sunday, yeah, probably.
during the football game.
I don't remember. I know it's on my bike. I don't know. These are the two piers. The closest one is on the southern side of the Monongahela River, and that was from Point Bridge number 2. The one on the other side that we're all quite familiar with by Heinz Field was from the Manchester Bridge. As you know, one time the south side was named Birmingham after the city in England, and they also named the city in the north side Manchester. Next one. This is a pier of the, what's it?
Wabash.
Wabash, yeah, the Wabash Railroad. This was the railroad came through the Wabash Tunnel across this bridge, which at one point was one of the largest cantilever railroad bridges around, and into the Wabash Terminal. The Wabash Railroad Bridge was also dismantled and recycled. I think the steel was used in the Dravosburg Bridge. And those spires, Tim, are from?
That's from one year, or actually for a number of years, I think the Three Rivers Arts Festival used to place flags on those poles during the festival. Different multicolored flags.
Okay, next one. This is the Two-in-One Bridge. We're actually driving over the Mon connecting railroad bridge, and the bridge beside it is the HotMetal Bridge, which I think, from what I see driving by there, will be open in the spring or late spring for bicycle and pedestrians. Next slide. I love this bridge. At one point, there was one bridge here, and they needed another bridge, and they widened the piers and built the HotMetal Bridge. But I think this really sums up the feeling for Pittsburgh and bridges, because these are built by Jones and Lockwood Steel. I mean, they just needed a bloody bridge to get across the river with a little train carrying hot metal. And yet they built the HotMetal Bridge almost to mimic the Mon Valley connecting railroad bridges. It didn't have to be this way. This is beautiful. I mean, drive across these bridges sometimes if you can early in the morning and look at the similarity of them. It's also one of the best views of the city from these bridges. But they could have built something just to get, I mean, you didn't even need all these trusses. They just could have built some plank or something to get this little train. I think the train only carried 3 cars with the hot metal in it across that bridge. And yet they went to this expense to build a beautiful bridge that was also functional. Next slide. Another example of the beauty in bridges. This is a stone arch bridge in Shenley Park, in the bowels of Shenley Park. This one is actually down behind the Shenley Park Visitor Center. This is built from tufa, T-U-F-A. It's like a calcareous limestone. If coral existed on dry land, it would be tufa. That's what it's like. I mean, this is a bridle path bridge deep in Shenley Park that was built like this. It's magnificent. And the tufa was imported from Ohio. It's not something that's found around here. There are several of these in Shenley Park. Next slide. Oh, this one I don't like to talk about. I purposely avoided this bridge. I did not know there was a picture of this going to be in the book until I got the final copy of the book. This is the Greenfield Bridge over the Parkway East. My relations with the city were much too good to talk about this bridge, so I didn't want to. I mean, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but there was a problem with concrete spaling off the bridge. So they built those big nets, and then bigger pieces of concrete started falling off the bridge and breaking through the nets. So they built this bridge under the bridge to connect the concrete.
permanent bump sign.
Yeah, that's what it always reminds me of. You know, if you ever drive down a highway and see a sign that's permanent, this is bump, yeah, why don't they remove the bump? The answer here, of course, is money. It was cheaper to do this for a while. The bridge is safe, but I really didn't want to talk about, and it's not talked about in the book. Somehow Tim got a picture of it in there.
Snuck it in there.
This is a poor attempt to get a view of the mural that's on the Steelers training facility. If you're ever down there on the south side, you can drive up to it, and the guard will, let you park and take a look at this mural. It's really magnificent. But while you can just see a hint here of the incline and the bridges, and the ball fields, of course, road to the left. But it's a mural really depicting the Steelers, the former Steelers, and the bridges just totally dominating. Next slide. Oh, yeah, I forgot about this. You're all familiar with the Bridge to Nowhere. Yeah, the Fort Duquesne Bridge, that the northern ramps weren't finished for a number of years. Well, there still is a mini Bridge to Nowhere in the city. This is the Birmingham. And this is on Carson Street. And there are two ramps on the southern side that were never finished. They're very subtle. They're hard to detect. If you looked at an aerial view of the Birmingham Bridge, it's symmetrical. On the northern side, you come across straight, you go into Fifth Avenue. You can go down to Forbes, or you can come up from Forbes. On the southern side, you just go to Carson Street. But there are two ramps there that were never finished. So I call it the mini bridge. Next slide, please. Okay, real pictures.
Okay, this is the beginning of my segment. Here, let me lower this a tad. This is the Hearse Island footbridge. And this too is a picture of a bridge from a bridge. I am standing on the 31st Street Bridge when I made this picture. One of the other differences that I didn't really talk about is you can see Bob's pictures are in color and mine are in black and white. So why black and white? Well, black and white is far less expensive to reproduce than color is. So I was restricted to black and white for that reason. But I really enjoy black and white, so that was a good thing for me. This is the South 10th Street suspension bridge, as you can see. This is also sort of taken from a bridge. This is taken from the McCardle roadway extension, which at that point is elevated, but doesn't really count as a bridge. But it was up in the air, so. Now, oddly enough, this is a 2-for-1 picture, too. Bob and I did one of these talks at the Silver Eye Center for Photography, which is over here on Carson Street, and they wanted a tour. So we took them for a walk down Carson Street, across the 10th Street Bridge, to the site of Ben's accident, for anybody who's interested, and then up the Duquesne Bluff steps to the top of Duquesne Bluff, look at the city, walk back down the Duquesne Bluff steps, back across the bridge and onto the gallery. That was really quite a walk, and a 2-for-1 special.
By the way, those steps, the steps are also the site one time of an incline. There was an incline along that pathway.
This is the 33rd Street Railroad Bridge, in fact owned by our friend Russ, who owned the Roman Barrel Arch Bridge on Washington Boulevard. And this is an interesting thing. I talked a lot about the bridge book being commissioned by the publisher and it being, them giving me pretty careful instructions about what to photograph and whatnot. But this is one of those photos that I just kind of found, and I did that, but I also found some photos around. And this is one of the found photos. I drive across the 40th Street Bridge regularly because I live just north of Millvale and my studio's in Lawrenceville, so the 40th Street Bridge happens to lie between them. One morning I was coming by across the 40th Street Bridge and this view presented itself, so I parked at the end of the bridge, walked back across and made this picture. The stillness of the water was really what got me. This is that very same barrel arch bridge that we talked about. There are two, as you know. There's the Lincoln Avenue Bridge and then the Railroad Bridge, and this is through underneath the one looking at the other. This is the Banquet Hall Bridge that Bob talked about with the panthers at either end. Okay, and this is another of my favorite stories about bridges, and also doesn't really have a lot to do with a bridge. When they told me they needed a photograph of this bridge, they said, you know, there's an artist in Pittsburgh named Bob Qualters who did a painting of this bridge that we used for the cover of a book by Sam Hazo. Sam Hazo is a former poet laureate of Pennsylvania. And, you know, would you look up that book cover and then go find us that view? And I said, well, sure. And I looked up the book cover and I went wandering off to this bridge to find that view, and guess what? It doesn't exist. Bob, as a painter, can take this thing called artistic license, which I don't really get. So he can play with perspective and placement of elements and so on, and I simply can record what's there. So I had to do as best I could, and this is as close as I could get to that view, but it's not the same view. This is the Portal Bridge that Bob talked about early in his talk. This is what's going on above that bridge is the parkway, and then what we're doing is standing out towards the point, looking back towards downtown. That's the Hilton Hotel. You can just vaguely see through the bottom of that bridge. This is the Monongahela River, and so you can see all of the city's Monongahela River bridges. Let's see if we can do this. Smithfield, Panhandle, Liberty, South 10th, Birmingham, HotMetal, and Monongahela Connecting Rail. Oh, and that's done from Mount Washington off one of those mushroom things. This is my favorite bridge, the 16th Street Bridge. And part of what I like about it is those armillary stairs that are on top of the piers. And part of what I like about it is that since so much of it is above the roadway, it's really visually interesting as you're driving across it. Here's the Allegheny River bridges. Let's see if we can do it again. Fort Pitt. Sorry, Fort Duquesne. See, I blew it already. Fort Duquesne. Roberto Clemente. No, it used to be the 6th Street. It used like, you know, everything in Pittsburgh used to be an Isley's. This used to be the 6th Street Bridge. Oh, and if it wasn't Isley's, I know it's a Squirrel Hill. It used to be a George Akins. So, Roberto Clemente, Andy Warhol, Rachel Carson, Fort Wayne, thank you. Veterans Bridge, and 16th Street. Yes, these pictures are all in there. Okay, these are some steps pictures. This is Bob's favorite set of steps, and these pictures were in fact done with the $2 plastic panoramic camera that I showed you early. This is called Rising Main Avenue, or Rising Main Street. We do have copies of the steps book with us for any of you who missed it. And this goes from, the bottom of this set of steps is down at the Parkway North, kind of behind that red brick wall that runs along the north side. And it runs all the way up the hill to Television Hill. So that would be the fine view section of the city. This is also in fine view. Well, this is not done with that panoramic camera. This is done with a very wide angle lens called a fisheye. This is Lap Lane, on the north side. It's also a dramatic set of steps. This is on Spring Garden. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of this set of steps. But this is one of the only places in the city I was ever hassled when I was doing photography for these projects. And it wasn't really much of a hassle. I was standing there taking a picture, and this kind of scruffy, drunken-looking guy comes up to me and says, "What are you doing here?" Often people did, you know. And I said, "Well, I'm taking a picture of this set of steps." And he said, "Nuh-uh, get the heck out of here." And I looked at him, and I thought for a second. I said, "No, you get the heck out of here." "Oh, okay." And he turned around and walked away. So much for being hassled. This runs down the front of, this runs down the front of Polish Hill, or I'm sorry, of Troy Hill. I'm sorry, I don't at the moment recall what street that is. But that is a legal city street. It appears on the map. You can just imagine, this is stealing one of Bob's jokes, so you can just imagine a tourist driving in his car, trying to make a right-hand turn up that street, sitting there with his blinker on, looking at the map, looking at the street, looking at the map. But it is a legal city street. This is on the south side. It might be 27th Street, it might be 30th Street. This too is on the south side. This is another one of the photos done with the panoramic camera. $2, click. This is another one of Bob's favorite corners. This is the corner of Romeo and Frasier Streets. Romeo is the steps and Frasier is the one going in front of us there, the ramp, which begins and ends in steps. Bob took a picture of this intersection and sent it into a 911 Commission photo contest and won. The 911 Commission could not believe that there was any place that actually had to have emergency service that looked like this. But this is the intersection of two city streets, so naturally it has to have emergency service. If you think I'm kidding, look at here. You can't really see it very well, but here's a telephone pole, and here's the street sign.
And there's a street light on the pole.
Yeah, it's not in the picture, but there's a street light.
That's an Oakland, right?
Yes.
Some of them right up Bates Street.
Unfortunately, this is in danger from the newest revision of the Mon-Fayette Expressway.
We've been writing to them, trying to get them to incorporate them into the design of the interchange rather than destroying them.
But yeah, if the interchange between the Mon-Fayette Expressway and the Parkway East goes through as currently planned, this will be destroyed. Sorry, the Mon Valley.
Not necessarily.
This is also the corner of two city streets in the city of Pittsburgh. I don't know which two, but they are behind St. Boniface Church on the north side. You can see them from the Parkway North, but if you have to be coming south towards the city of Pittsburgh to be able to see them. This is on the Hill. And I had a fascinating tour of the Hill District. As I mentioned in the Spring Garden photo, when I went in different neighborhoods photographing city steps, quite often people challenged me, "What are you doing here?" And the Hill was one of those places. And I'm walking around the Hill, and some guy walks up to me and says, "Well, what are you doing here?" And I explain, I'm taking pictures of a book that's about city steps, and there's a bunch of good city steps around here. I'm just walking around, having a look at them, and taking some pictures. And the guy said, "Well, that's great, but you don't want to come around here at night." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he says, "Because the steps change character completely at night. This set over here, that's drugs. This set over here, that's prostitution," and so on. So he knew I didn't want to be messing with any of that stuff. And that's that. If you want to see more of my pictures, I'm afraid you are going to have to buy the books.
We are going to take questions, but I know I'll lose some of you during the course. Next month's meeting is on Wednesday the 14th, not on Tuesday here. Those of you who are used to the Wednesday night. Anyone who's new, and there are a lot of new people tonight that want to be on our mailing list, please sign on your way out. Okay, and we also have membership forms. Bob, you want to help take some questions?
If you have any questions, we'll try. Sure. Yes, sir.
Seattle has a floating bridge. Where's our floating bridge?
That's a good question. That's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that. Yes.
I guess I have three maybe nitpicking questions. One is, you said you have every kind of bridge. He just mentioned the
Yep.
floating bridge. I don't think it's a movable bridge in Pittsburgh, is there?
No.
Okay, so that's two.
Two. Yeah.
We always learn stuff like this at
Think
these.
again.
Okay. You mentioned rolling in the wire, a wire rope.
Yes.
Now, there seems to be a general belief in this area, and I've seen it in another book, that he invented wire rope, which is totally wrong. There were wire rope bridges in the United States before floating. Wire rope was invented in the 1770s for mining purposes, and it was used in Europe for mining. And he was not the first bridge builder to use wire rope. Third thing has to do with photography. It seems to me almost every good bridge book that I've seen is in black and white. And I don't think it's for the reason to save money. I think this structure comes out much better in black and white than it does in color.
The justification that was given to me was about money, but I tend to agree with you. I work primarily in black and white, and I think that it has an elegance and a timelessness that color simply doesn't have.
You can see the bones of the bridge in black and white. You can't.
Yeah, you see, it's got better contrast, and I think the subject.
Everything I've read about Roebling is, and I went into it in some detail, is I think I'd have to disagree with you, that I think he was the first.
I'll give you a reference.
He could, but he actually designed the road, not for bridges, but for the Portage Railroad.
The first iron ropes were built by a mining engineer in Germany.
Yes, he adapted that, I knew that,
In 1770,
Right.
Those were wrought iron.
Right.
Now, it may be the Roebling made the first steel rope. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not either, that's a good point.
But there were bridges built in eastern Pennsylvania. Near Philadelphia, there was one across the Schuylkill. There was a.
What was the name of it?
I don't know, I have the date on it.
Yeah, because I'm doing a book now of
It
bridges
doesn't
there.
exist anymore.
Yeah, no, I know, the Great Bridge or something, yeah. But
And then
he
the
actually,
French were building, took the American model and actually built bridges across the Loire in 1820, well before Roebling had wire suspensions.
yeah, but he actually got into the whole wire twisting for the
Oh, yeah.
Portage Railroad.
Other
Because
people had done it.
they were breaking it, and then he did adapt German patents to it, and so, but that's good. Any other question, any other nitpicking? Go ahead.
I was just asking you, I saw some steep steps behind St. Mazalia's up in Greenfield,
Yes,
and are they in your book, or?
yes.
Do they go from the side of the hill down to?
They go all the way down to that church, St. Nicholas, or?
It's in the run, I can't remember which
Yeah, it
church
goes all the way down
It
to
goes
the
all the way
run.
down to the run.
Yeah, they're actually a street also, and they come down and they break off into another street.
Wasn't there a school at the top of those steps?
Yes,
Yeah, it's
there
up
is.
there, yeah.
Because
The
I don't
public
know how
school.
many people I ran into who said, oh yeah, I used to walk those steps to go to school.
St. Mazalia,
There you go.
yeah.
Yes,
So are all the steps streets, is that it?
no.
Some of them are sidewalks.
There are 738 sets of steps in this city, and there's 370 are streets, or 370 streets in the city are nothing but flights of steps. And they're legal streets. And the one good thing is the book did point it out, and I also talked to city council about this. Because they're streets, they fall under federal funding for maintenance and repairs and stuff like that. And the city step budget has gone from 0 to now $500,000 a year to now Guy Coster in October said that he's dedicating, like he has a red up crew, they're gonna have a crew in public works on steps, doing nothing but steps.
A couple over here.
In your book, do you have any photos of the, I know on the slides I didn't see, but the bridge, just a hop, skip, and a jumping away from here, that connects Forbes Avenue with Braddock Avenue over Lower Frick Park? The
No.
bridge there.
No, yeah, that's a nice bridge too, yeah,
Yeah,
no.
it's a great place to walk across.
Yeah.
And great to look from below it and
Yep.
from on top.
Just shrink it down, you get the same thing.
I don't know if it has a
for
name
footbridge.
either. I don't even know if it has a name.
No, I think it's just the Forbes Ave Bridge.
When you're talking about the discrepancy in like definitions of Allegheny County versus Pittsburgh, what did you use for this? Did you use city limits or
Yes.
did you use greater Pittsburgh?
No, it had to be, and it was all done in computer mapping, so it was actual city limits. The bridge either had to be in the city or spanning the city limits, you know, from the city of Pittsburgh to another
So the
municipality.
Homestead Grays Bridge counted because
Counts,
it enters the city.
Yeah.
Then also, did you have like a requirement for it being like a certain length or?
No,
Spanning
I mean, this
something?
gets a little confusing because in some books it talks about this, but the requirement is if a bridge is over 60 feet, it has to be inspected every 2 years. We used everything. I think the smallest one in most of the databases was 8 feet. I'm not exactly sure, but we didn't use that. I forget what it's called.
Also,
Some
the
national
privately owned
transportation.
bridges that we included, I believe, were the railroad bridges,
Okay.
anything on personal property.
Yes.
That's what I was kind of
The
curious
bridge that goes to nowhere, was it once a bridge?
Oh, yeah. It was one of the parkway, was it the fourth?
Well, the bridge, you know where it was the Fort Duquesne Bridge going over to the north side. They could finish the bridge from the Pittsburgh side over the Allegheny River, and then they couldn't agree on where that new highway was going to go over there, so the bridge just stopped. And it became very famous when was a Pitt student drove his car off the edge of it, and he was unhurt. You know why? Yes.
I was wondering, has there ever been a ceremony, are there ever ceremonies to mark a naming for a bridge?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there sure was a hell of a party at the Andy Warhol.
There's pictures
Bridge,
of the
yeah.
party, there's a picture of the rededication, two pictures of the rededication of the Warhol Bridge in the book. And we do this routinely. Bob talks about this a little bit. Go ahead. The naming of bridges is purely political.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, the naming is purely a political process. When a bridge is being built, like the McArdle roadway bridges, they were called Mount Washington Road Bridge #1. They start off with a functional name. And then if they're going to be named, it's up to the ownership. City council for city bridges, county council for county bridges, state legislature for PennDOT.
And, you know, it's not just the bridges that get multiple names. So I have to tell you that the city does this routinely. Bob and I were graciously cited for proclamations from city council. And there was a day that was set aside to be Steps of Pittsburgh Day, and there was a day that was set aside to be Bridges of Pittsburgh Day. But, you know, 5 or 6 other people also received proclamations on the same day as we did. And oddly enough, they were also the nonprofit organization B Day, and you know, and so on. So they piggyback everything they
Let's do
can.
one more. Yeah.
Can you give me any reference that tells about the George Westinghouse Bridge? I think it's
No.
out of your...
No.
It's not in the city.
The best reference, probably, it would be it's in the book, it's the website, the Bridges and Tunnels of Allegheny County.
And Anita was asking about that bridge.
I think she left, yeah.
Oh, she left.
We'll be glad to, we have books,
They're books for sale, both books.
and
Thank you.
postcards are free.
This
Thank
is
you.
our second largest crowd ever. Thank you, everybody. Again, our meeting, we welcome memberships, but our meetings are free whether you're a member or not. We'll be here the 14th, Valentine night, to hear about the Squirrel Hill Coalition. Look at our website. It's on the brochure. Look at our website. There are interesting things there. We will be announcing 2 walking tours for the spring and summer.